Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. We're going to start with an ESPN.com story ranking all 134 FBS quarterback situations into tiers ahead of the 2024 season. And I'll tell you this. Garrett Nussmeier is in tier 9 of this list. 9. And when you hear that, you're probably like, oh my God, what? ESPN, they hate LSU, they don't know what they're doing. Well, it's not quite that cut and dried. But I am going to kind of get into why he's in the 9th tier of this list. It's not necessarily indicative of expected performance. I think more so indicative of the pool of quarterbacks that they have put him in relative to his situation. So I'll get into this, but I want to start off this conversation before we get to Nussmeier with just kind of where this quarterback crop is entering the season. There are always breakout stars. There are always guys who develop at different speeds, and you never know when the next Joe Burrow is coming along. Things happen over the course of a long football season. But I will say that at this point in the calendars, if I went back to June of 2023, you had a lot of star power and proven production coming back to college football at the quarterback spot. Of course, Caleb Williams was returning off a Heisman Trophy season. That's chief among the list. But everybody loved Drake May at this point last year based on his measurables, maybe potentially transferring to Alabama, decided, no, I'm a North Carolina guy, going to stay here with the Tar Heels. J.J. McCarthy had kind of emerged as a winning quarterback with Michigan. I think it's fair to put Bo Nix and Michael Penix at the forefront of that position. They had great years in 2022 in the Pac-12. Certainly Jaden Daniels and Jordan Travis, who played on opening weekend, were known commodities at that point, coming off really productive years with a lot of talent. I mean, that's a lot of guys at the top of this list that were either big time in NFL draft prospects or just super productive college players. And at this year, it just doesn't quite feel like that. And I think that this ESPN story kind of lends itself to that when it says that tier 1 here is the cream of a questionable crop, saying like, this is, I think, like the best we got, but how good is it? And in that group, they've got Jalen Milroe at Alabama, Carson Beck at Georgia, Dylan Gabriel now at Oregon, and Quinn Ewers at Texas. Now, I'm not in a hurry to draft Jalen Milroe first overall. And y'all know, listening to me last year in September, I made the statement. It was wildly incorrect, and it was a really dumb thing to say, but I did believe it at the time. I thought that Alabama had the worst quarterback situation in the SEC outside of Vanderbilt after 3 weeks last year. That counts the Texas game, where I didn't think Milroe played worth a flip. He got benched in that South Florida game. They went to the other guys. They weren't any better. And I was like, Jalen Milroe can't throw. And the guys they brought in behind him, whether it's Buckner or who, like, these guys stink too. Ty Simpson. Like, this is a disaster in Tuscaloosa. And Jalen Milroe righted the course because he's freakishly athletic, relied on his legs a good bit, threw a great deep ball, and cleaned up the terrible decisions that he made early in the season. All of that said, I don't know if he's a super awesome quarterback. I think he's fine. Comparing him to Bryce Young or Tua Tagovailoa or even A.J. McCarron, I think, is ambitious. And Carson Beck, like, people think he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. But is that because he plays with a bunch of pros, or is that because he's the best quarterback in the country? I don't know. Dylan Gabriel's thrown for a lot of yards. Is he great? Is he going to be great at Oregon? I don't know. Quinn Ewers is a mega talent. He looked great in Tuscaloosa. They had a great year last year. But is he Caleb Williams? I don't think so. He's not Jaden Daniels at this point. I don't even know that he's Jordan Travis, who I think was great at college. So I feel like the top of this list is not as rock solid as it was last year. Doesn't mean they can't improve or to become the next group of stars, but it feels like that's a pretty questionable group at the top. And when I say that Garrett Nussmeier is not being disrespected in tier 9, it's because I don't know that this is necessarily the first tier is the best, second tier is the second best, third tier is the third best. No, they basically did it by grouping. What in common do you have with the other guys? And their tier 2 is tier 1 with an asterisk. That's Noah Fifata, who was at Arizona, Shedeur Sanders, who everyone really likes as a first-round pick, Jalen Daniels at Kansas, Cam Ward transferring down from Washington State to Miami, Cam Rising, who's been at Utah for 900 years. He's got to be 28. But these guys all have an issue here or there. You've got checking the upside meter. That's 9 different groups. It's like maybe these guys aren't super high draftable guys, but they're good college players. That's Jackson Dart. It's Will Howard, Ohio State, Brady Cook at Missouri, Seth Hennigan at Memphis, who I have no idea anything about. But these guys are more so college guys. Then you've got young quarterbacks like Dylan Raiola at Nebraska, Jackson Arnold, who's taken over at Oklahoma, the former 5-star Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee, who they're really excited about running that Josh Heupel offense. And look, Garrett Nussmeier doesn't fit into any of those categories. And then you've got the transfer market. Well, he doesn't fit into tier 5 there because he's not a transfer. He's a guy that's been there. Then you've got in tier 6. In this, you might not know us yet, but, well, I think a lot of people know Garrett Nussmeier because he's played in some really big spots. So by the time you get all the way down to Garrett Nussmeier in tier 9 of this list, you're talking about a group that is guys with shoes to fill. And that's very much where Garrett Nussmeier is. They've got Brock Vandagriff at Kentucky. I don't know that was awesome 2 years of transfers over at Kentucky, but he's the next transfer to come in. You've got Alex Orji at Michigan, who's taken over for J.J. McCarthy. You've got Connor Harrell at North Carolina, who's taken over for Drake May. And this makes a lot of sense that, yeah, Garrett Nussmeier is filling huge shoes of Jaden Daniels. And I say all of this. One, the first part was a little bit for effect. He's in tier 9? What? Well, he's in tier 9 because that's where the guys filling the big shoes are. But I will say that just to add my 2 cents on this thing is that I feel really good about Garrett Nussmeier taking over for LSU. Now, that said, I felt really good about Miles Brennan filling in for Joe Burrow at LSU. And not in the way that Miles Brennan needed to be as good as Joe Burrow. I just thought that Miles Brennan would do a pretty good job. And we just truly never got to see that. He threw for a ton of yards when they got way behind against Mississippi State in the opener, and he threw for a ton of yards in an absolute shootout against Missouri. And he played Vanderbilt in a game in there as well, and he threw for a ton of yards in that game too. So it felt like things were moving in the right direction, but we never got to see that through. And then, of course, he got hurt, and we know what happens after that, and Jaden Daniels takes over. And so I never expected Miles Brennan to take over for Joe Burrow and just keep things humming right along. I just thought he'd be good. And I don't expect Garrett Nussmeier to just take over for Jaden Daniels and everything looks exactly as it did. But I think he'll be good. And the blurb here on it is from ESPN. It says, look, the sample sizes are small, of course, but in his 3 years at LSU, Nussmeier's thrown at least 10 passes in 10 games. The first 5 of those games, 2 of which came against FCS foes, he completed 58% of his throws for 7.2 yards per pass and had 3 touchdowns and 4 picks. In the last 5, a slate that includes Alabama, Georgia, he completed 63%, averaged 9.2 yards per pass, and threw 8 touchdowns with 3 interceptions. You know, we used to think of Garrett Nussmeier as an absolute gunslinger because when he got here, that's kind of what he was. We saw it in practice. We certainly saw it in the spring game. Like, he was just going to go out there and let it rip. And honestly, he really did that 2 years ago in the SEC championship game against Georgia. He was flinging it all over the place. They hit some big plays, and obviously he turned it over as well. And it was, chaos because they were losing by a ton, and you were just trying to see what you could do, throwing it around the yard against the best team in the country. But I don't know that I necessarily believe that Garrett Nussmeier is an absolute gunslinger now. I think he's just a good quarterback who's waited his turn and has his shot. And if we were actually going to put these into tiers based purely on ability level and expected productivity, I would feel really comfortable putting Garrett Nussmeier in the top 3 tiers of whatever that looks like. Like, I'm not immediately ready to toss him in with some of these guys. Like, I think he can be every bit as good as Quinn Ewers or better than Quinn Ewers, but Quinn Ewers has done this before. I think he can be every bit as productive as Carson Beck because I think he's got a lot of weapons around him. but Beck's already played a full season and is a more proven commodity. So, like, I'm not ready to toss him right in there with those guys right this second. I don't know that the NFL scouts look at him in the way that they do Shedeur Sanders. He certainly doesn't have as much productivity as Jalen Daniels does at Kansas. So, like, I'm not going to just completely throw purple and gold glasses on and shove Garrett Nussmeier right to the top of this list because he looked pretty good against Wisconsin in the bowl game. But I will say, like, I think he's in the top 20 quarterbacks in the country. I can make an argument he's in the top 16, 18, 15. It's tough because it's everybody's situation is different. It's hard to compare the quarterback at Kansas to the quarterback at LSU. But I feel good about that, and it's certainly going to be a talking point into media days next month and when we get to fall camp, like, what can he be? And we feel like from game one as the full-time starter, you're probably going to need to hit the ground running because I don't know that I'm excited about LSU holding a Lincoln Riley offense to 17 points out in Vegas. Maybe they will, but that remains to be seen. He needs to get going quick. And I feel pretty good about that. We've lived in an era here of really being nervous about the next guy up at quarterback, and we're starting to shake our way out of that because you got 2 Heisman winners right in the rearview mirror. But I feel good about where Garrett Nussmeier is. I don't think he's in the 9th tier if we're going purely off ability, but as they were grouping them together, this made a lot of sense. If you want to check it out in its entirety, you can do that on ESPN.com. The story right there on the college football front page for insiders who are getting ready for football, because that's kind of what we're doing. But hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.